We live in space every day. This is space. Our phone is space. The data that we use every day is space. And we have to make sure that people go in with an open mindset to understand how important space has been historically, where it is right now, and where it is going. And it's about the survival of humanity.
Hey, SpaceWatchers, this is Space Café Radio, your channel about trends, awesome events, and interesting people in the space sector. At the 40th Space Symposium in April 2025 in Colorado Springs, we had the chance to talk with ISU's president, Dr. John Wensveen, about his vision for the International Space University and the Moonshot 2030 initiative. Our senior editor and advisor Laura Todd spoke with Dr. Wensveen initially in our Space Café 33 Minutes with format. But this conversation was so rich and enlightening that we are happy to offer you the conversation here as a Space Café Radio. With that, over to you, Laura.
Hi, Space Watchers. Here we are, back on day 3 of Space Symposium, running a 33 minutes, and I have the great pleasure to introduce my friend John Wensveen, who is currently the president of the university.
Here it should read International Space University. Apologize, but that somehow got lost within the transmission.
And you got that position September last year?
September the 1st, yes. Yep.
So why don't you tell us then? You're coming up nearly on a first-year anniversary. How's it been? What have been your main takeaways and what you're looking forward to moving forward?
It's a surreal experience. So first of all, this is the second time I've had the opportunity to appear on camera. IAC in Milan in last October. And I always said, if you made it to SpaceWatch.Global, then you've made it. Because some people say Oprah. No, this is where we need to be in the world of space. So I started September 1st this last year. And what's interesting, a quick story, I applied to become the president not once, not twice, but 3 times in the last decade. And I don't think ISU was ready for me at that time. I was a little too forward thinking in terms of innovation. And the 3rd time was a charm. And I have to say that it's been a most incredible adventure over the last 7 months because it's an instrumental role that really gets to determine what the future of space is going to be from the perspective of International Space University serving the public and private sectors. And it comes with extreme challenges, which is also fitting with the world of space and the direction that it continues to move in. But it's an extremely rewarding experience. And in a short period of time, already seeing the dents that we are making as an organization as we develop even more partnerships on a global basis, including with SpaceWatch.Global.
So what would you say then have been your biggest achievements thus far or the biggest challenges you've seen just as you got started in this first 7 months?
So I look at everything from an internal and external perspective. And internally, the biggest challenge is making sure that you've got a strategic plan that's in alignment with the future, because the future is here now, and you always have to ask the question, what are you doing about it? So one of my roles coming in, which the board really wanted, was a disruptor that would come in and disrupt in a positive way to create a new strategic plan that propelled ISU into the future. And when we were built 38 years ago, we actually celebrate our 2nd anniversary on April the 12th, this next week. It was really meant for the public sector, which made sense. Now, with the privatization and commercialization of space, ISU is looking at our next generation of who we are going to be. And we created what we call the Moonshot 2030 strategic plan. Looking back, I probably should have called it the 2040 Mars shot because we're really looking into the future, but we can always rebrand. And the goal there was to look 5 years into the future. Beyond that, it's a little bit challenging. And then reverse engineer what we're going to be. What is it that we want to be when we grow up? So we're now focused on 3 pillars of diversified revenue generation, philanthropic support, grants acquisition, and planting our flag more globally. So right now we work with 113 countries, and we do a lot of programs that go in and out of countries, but our goal now is to pursue what we call a satellite campus model in which the ISU flag is permanently affixed in the soil with local and regional partners like space agencies, academic institutions, other groups within the private public sector area. And we actually have a press release about to come out where we signed a deal this morning where Colorado Springs will be the very first satellite campus in the United States for ISU. And it's a partnership with the Space Foundation. We're really excited about it. But the goal is to put that in 6 regions of the world and have multiple flags that operate essentially 365 days of the year, providing local and regional programs based upon what the needs of that environment are.
I think, so we've really seen at this Space Symposium, in my opinion, a strong message about collaboration, international partnerships, bringing the competencies from the different areas, different countries for capabilities and technologies. And So what you're saying totally resonates, to have those campuses around the world to truly make that international. Is there something that's linked then to looking at the strengths and competencies of these different regions for what you can develop in terms of talent, competence, and knowledge moving forward for what will be needed for space?
So this is a great conversation that can go for hours. And whenever I ask C-suites what keeps you up at night, the one thing, it's usually two things. One is security, particularly from a cyber perspective, and the other is about talent, and it's about the current workforce, but also the future workforce. And a lot of the initiatives that we look at in space and other industry verticals is that a lot of this is not relevant if you don't have a pipeline of talent where you're looking at new skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. And when ISU was created, it was built as a neutral third party, if I could put it that way, to serve all countries, all nations, no matter what is going on politically, etc. And we continue to have that in our DNA. And we look at developed world, the developing nations, and everybody has the same problems, just on different scales. So the timing couldn't be more critical, particularly for an event like Space Symposium and other types of events that occur throughout the world, to address these topics, because we're all talking about it, but we're not necessarily sitting around the same table together to actually address what those trends and challenges, opportunities, and strategies are. And I see ISU's role moving forward, given how neutral we are to all countries, to be the gorilla glue, if you will, that brings the world together to actually facilitate these conversations so that there's an advancement on an annual basis where we do get the discussions, but we put it together into a centralized network where we're creating a solar system, and ISU's at the middle of that solar system to make sure that we know what the topics are, everybody understands what their roles, responsibilities are, and more importantly, accountability. It's great to have a bagel and a coffee and see you next year, but you have to have that happening throughout the year and then measuring what the performance metrics are so that we are advancing what the ultimate mission is.
I have to say, it's one of the most fun things that I see when you see ISU graduates and they see each other and there's happiness and joy to catch up and reminisce of the good times that they had and the things they learned with the ISU. So I really appreciate what you're saying, like to leverage that network, because these are people that are in different countries or in different domains, or in the private, the public sector, they're in military. How is it you're going to strengthen that network and build upon that strong foundation what ISU clearly has? So how do you see that moving forward?
So one of the things I've recognized is the power of the pin, as I call it. And whenever you go to any kind of a space event and there's an ISU pin, people will flock to it because they know what it symbolizes. And I come from the world of aviation and aerospace, which is a very small industry. But when you talk space, it's even smaller, and it's a family and everybody knows everybody. And ISU this week actually is crossing the threshold of 6,000 alumni globally. And we have graduates of our academic and our professional development programs that extend to every avenue space, from entry level to mid-level to the C-suite to founders of extremely successful space companies. And it's important to engage that population. And sometimes I'll say we have to re-engage the alumni. And I'm taking that back now, because I don't believe we've ever done that. I think ISU has been in touch but not engaged. So we're now moving forward with a new engagement strategy. It's an outreach plan to identify who are our alumni and bring them back to ISU. And there's different ways that we can do that. Understand the power of the network and ask one really important question that institutions typically do not do. Instead of asking for things that you can give us, we need to turn that around and say, how can we help you? And our future success is going to be based on strategic co-invested partnerships where you date, you propose, you get married, and the goal is not to get divorced. And we don't look at things from a vendor relationship. It's truly a partnership, and we have a win-win. So what is it that you need for success? What is it that we need? And then how do we co-invest together to actually advance the needle and move that forward? So our new strategy moving forward in 2025 and beyond, as part of our Moonshot strategic plan, is engagement and outreach, and not to be afraid to make the ask as ISU to our alumni, but to ask our alumni what we can do to help you. And it's surprising, they never get the question, and they say, no one's ever asked me. So we want time, talent, and very importantly, treasure, to create a culture of giving back to your organization. And being global in nature, we deal with so many different cultures where often there isn't a give back culture. And in North America, if you go to a university, you're linked to it for the rest of your life and you give back in many ways, particularly financially. And ISU is changing our culture and our climate from the very beginning. So all those new recruits that come into our programs understand what that culture of give back is, and we'll give back to you. But we're here to support the future alumni base as well as the existing. And they're in extremely powerful positions. And we're sitting here talking in the last, 10, 15 minutes, and I've already seen 7 alumni pins walking around. 8, including another one standing in front of us right now. Right?
I'm slightly short-sighted, so I can't see the pin, so I'll take your word for it. So that's really interesting, because I also come from aerospace, and it always struck me that you've got a delta between, you've got an engineer, for example, that builds an aircraft who doesn't truly understand how it operates, what's really needed in the operational environment to make it simpler, to make it easier for the customer, the end user. So I totally support what you're saying, giving back, because ISU needs funds to run.
Yep.
Is this also then something to think about, is to utilize that network to identify what should the curriculum be of the ISU moving forward, for what we talked about, the pipeline coming through. So what are the talents needed? What competences and skills can be developed? Is that something then to engage also the network with?
Absolutely. Academic institutions, training organizations all over the world, and I'll be the first to stand on the stage and say that, even if I represent an academic institution, is that we typically dictate to the world what we think your needs are, rather than listening to find what needs are, short, medium, and long term. So this is a tremendous opportunity for us. It's a pivotal point in our next level of success to engage and find out what is it that we need to do in terms of skills. And it's the new skilling, the upskilling, the reskilling. And I'm a firm believer that the traditional ways of training and educating are disappearing. And the typical 4-year degree is not the degree of the future. The 5-year PhD, the 2-year master's. It's so important to not ignore that a degree isn't everything. And yes, we have degrees and we'll continue to grow and enhance, but we also have to be more in line with the workforce in terms of how you do internships, apprenticeships, which are traditionally blue collar, in quotes, which are no longer anymore. It's the white collar mixed in with the blue collar, and it's terrible terminology to use that it should be deleted from our vocabulary. We need a whole new way of branding it and making it sexy. And basically stacked credentials are more important than ever before. And when you talk to industry and they say, I need someone now, or I can't wait for 4 years or 3 years or whatever the timeline is, which is one of the reasons that a lot of industry verticals are creating their own corporate universities to create the training programs that they need, because other institutions are giving it to them. So for us, we're listening, we're asking, and we are completely dependent on public and private sector telling ISU what we need to do. But then I'll turn that around and say, are you willing to put skin in the game? How are you investing in this? Is it funding? Is it access to infrastructure? Is it providing the internship, employment opportunities, and the longer term professional development training so that you're continuously learning? And I believe in a 0 to hero model. How do I get you at birth and take you all the way through end of career so that we're touched with you throughout that journey, along with all of the other partners that we work with?
It genuinely pleases me to hear you say that, because I think, so I worked for Airbus for a period, and one of the most inspirational leaders who really knew his stuff was Tom Williams, who started as an apprentice in Broughton and became head of programs and head of operations. And he knew the overall environment, he knew the end-to-end value chain, and he did it in a pragmatic way. So I think that's definitely the way to go. Have you already had feedback on that to see what's the gap about what's provided today in the theory, the academic field, versus people saying, no, we really need this now? Is there anything that's prioritized?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So when I look at academic pathways and I look at professional development pathways, they're equal in terms of how important they are. They're just different journeys of how you get to where you need to go. And whenever I have an opportunity to speak to anybody outside of our own ISU walls per se, which is one of the benefits to coming to Space Symposium, among other conferences, exhibitions, summits that exist, is that people have a lot to say, but they haven't been positioned to actually stimulate the conversation. And we rely on feedback probably more than ever before, because although ISU's been around for 38 years, if we are not relevant to the changing needs of the environment, we may not be relevant in the future. And the other thing that's obviously a concern to me as the new president of ISU are the competitive forces that exist. And it's not just other academic institutions, training providers that are out there. It's emerging technology. And believe it or not, AI applications, ChatGPT is a competitor to my organization because it's instant gratification in terms of knowledge. And of course, there's a lot of things you have to be aware of with that. But we have to be very concerned about how emerging technologies are going to be competitive forces in the future and new ways of delivering education and training and how you earn different types of credentials and just knowledge in general. So to answer your question, 100% relying on feedback. People are very surprised when I ask them, what are your thoughts? Because they're not used to hearing that. And that's really great for us in terms of how we bring that back to our home campus moving forward.
I agree in the skill set in terms of the technology and the innovation, and that's totally relevant. However, I think there's a big elephant in the room, and this is what I see with how I would describe as the legacy companies, because we talk about new space and new space economy and everything else, and yet people don't understand that's linked in with new ways of working. Is this something you're seeing as a challenge? Because you've got your old-fashioned project management and it's in series and it's like milestone related, but the true success we have is people that work in a more agile mode, iterative mode, learning from failure. So there's a huge mindset and cultural change we need to make. So is that something that you've seen yourself that you're going to integrate in what you're doing moving forward for how you train these people?
Yeah, I think part of our mission is to also knock on the door, if you will, and you talk about the elephant in the room. There are a lot of legacy organizations out there, particularly on the public sector side, that need to understand that there are new ways of doing things. And often there's a resistance because this is how we've done it for 30 years. This is the way we'll continue to do it for the next 30 years. And if you have that kind of mentality, you're not going to be here in 30 years. You might not be here in 3 years. And you have to be able to break the resistance. So for an example, I'm actually leaving Space Symposium to another event to talk specifically about this as a keynote speaker. And I'm also dealing with another organization elsewhere in the world in the insurance business. They're one of the world's biggest insurance companies. And when they hear the word space, they totally ignore it and don't believe that they should be involved in it. But if they're not involved in the growing space economy, they may not be relevant. They don't think about the things that insurance businesses need to do, the underwriting, the liability aspects of space. And what's interesting when we talk about new space or new space economy, it's like the word innovation. We use the word innovation every day, but most people don't even understand what the word innovation is. It's just a trendy thing. But my definition of innovation coming from that background is that you've identified a challenge and now you're developing a strategic solution to fix that challenge. So when we talk about new space or new space economy, I have some people that support it and others think that I'm totally wacko and that there's no such thing. It's just a hype in words. I don't look at it as space as an industry vertical. Just as technology once was an industry vertical, it is not. It's an economy. Space is an economy. There's no arguing about that. And we can debate that left and right, but it's an emerging economy. And I'm not going to throw numbers out there because there's a lot of speculation. Is it a 1 trillion? Is it a 2 trillion? Is it a 500 million? Forget it. It doesn't even matter. The fact is that privatization and commercialization of space is the engine on the train now, where the public sector is there to support the caboose, if you will, of the train system. And we rely on each other. And moving forward, if we don't change our thought, and one of the things that I'm starting to see is even in space is we're bringing in new mindsets, especially at leadership levels that don't come from traditional space paths, including myself, that bring in a new way of thinking, new knowledge that forces everybody to sit around the table and think a little bit differently, but to do so at an accelerated pace. So I'm pretty optimistic that things are going to change and move in the right direction. Some things happen a little slower than they should, but space is evolving so quickly in terms of technology, the emerging technologies, but not so fast on the infrastructure, policy, regulatory side. And until all of that's in alignment, and we're also co-investing in what that looks like, it's going to create more challenges. But we have to create more education and awareness and make sure that the dysfunctional families become functional families by putting them around and we're all agreeing this is our path forward, and here's my role, here's my responsibility, here's how I'm holding myself accountable so that we can actually move forward successfully.
I think it's interesting what you've just said, because when we look at, we heard yesterday on the NATO panel that we need to normalize space operations and space as a domain, which I agree with. And the challenge we have is, you touched on it, was when you communicate with people, they hear the word space and, oh, it's something special and it's nothing to do with me. How do you see that moving forward? So we try to do our bit here with SpaceWatch.Global, obviously, but how to communicate more effectively to the everyday person and to all these like talent and knowledge-based areas that could have such a significant impact on the space economy.
Sure.
But they don't know about it yet. So is that something also you want to try and integrate with the ISU?
Yes, definitely. And we have, I would say, a shorter term solution of how we're addressing that. So space is very technical and you have a lot of technical minds, and sometimes how a technical mind communicates may not be absorbed the same way that it was meant to be distributed. So we have to have more awareness about how we communicate and what we do. And I think we have to bring it back more to a ground level. What's the foundation? So ISU is now actually space economy, however we're going to define it, and believe that all space sectors and non-space sectors should have a new space economy learning experience to understand what it is and where it's going, focused on trends, challenges, opportunities, and strategies. And when you have an awareness about what space is here on Earth, inner and outer space applications, and just literally looking at the basics behind it, it's not just satellites and ET, which there's a lot of stereotypes around space. It's so much more than that. And we live in space every day. This is space. Our phone is space. The data that we use every day is space. And we have to make sure that people go in with an open mindset to understand how important space has been historically, where it is right now, and where it is going. And it's about the survival of humanity. It's about Earth observation. It's about collecting data that makes our lives better, more efficient, more successful, among other things. But let's start at the ground level. And ISU, from what I understand, is actually now developing the very first new space economy program that will go to space and non-space verticals, like a Space 101, but for new space economy. And then we can advance that with different levels that are specifically focused on things like spaceports as economic development engines, as an example, among other things that we're looking at.
Which makes me happy to hear. What do you see then are the biggest challenges for, we've covered a wide range of topics. So based on what you've seen thus far and based on the current status, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges and what would you like to see to overcome those?
I think the biggest challenge has been reflected on us already here today. It's that we're all talking, but not talking in a collective fashion. And even though we're at Space Symposium under one roof, we have the world's smartest minds and the biggest space network in existence together. And yet we're all having separate conversations about certain topics. So what is the mission of space at the end of the day? How do we all support it? And it's an extreme challenge to create an awareness where we're all working towards a common goal. And especially with the privatization of space, which is terrific, all of these players in the game have their own independent missions and they support space, and sometimes they actually contradict space. And I think that we have to, if I could solve all the world's problems today, it would be making sure that the space community really understands why we're coming together to work collectively, because it is truly the only thing that brings all nations together, no matter what the feelings are, what the political situations are, to move towards one common good. And I'd like to see improved communication and awareness about what those topics are, and more importantly, coming up with solutions, strategies that actually advance us in the right direction, and to do so quickly.
I totally aligns with the tagline that I've used for this week is space is bigger than borders. And it's definitely the theme that we've heard. But you're right, it's how to do that in a structured way so we could get action, get real tangible output instead of continuing to talk about it and agree on principle. And again, so I think this is where the foundation of having people trained in the right way, educated in the right way, doing the right kind of mixed programs that you're going to be doing is a way forward on that. So the positives of Space Symposium, what stood out for you then? What stood out for you in terms of the positives for Space Symposium? So we talked about a lot of people here talking.
Yeah.
What have you seen that's moved in terms of a needle?
So this is the most incredible event. This is actually the first time I've ever attended. I didn't know what to anticipate. And earlier we started our show with the power of the pen, but it's the power of the people. And as we sit here and we're at the intersection of a highway right now that has off-ramps into different worlds, and it is the most positive, uplifting community that I've experienced in terms of other things that I've experienced. The smiles, the positivity, the optimism about where space is going. And we're all here for one reason, and everybody's passionate about it. So that just exudes itself. And for me personally, and from the ISU perspective, it's connecting with our network that exists and creating a new network that we didn't have access to. And we're not even finished with Space Symposium. And we as an organization have exceeded 30 meetings. Some of them were planned in advance, some of them were not, and they were surprising meetings. And we realized through the power of that connection that, we actually have things in common and we can work together. And to me, that's probably the biggest takeaway, because this is going to be the gift that keeps on giving. We're not going to leave here and it's the end of an event. There are deliverables that will continue throughout the year and beyond with the new partnerships that we're establishing and those that we're going to enhance that already exist.
I totally share. I've been to multiple space events, and this is one of the most positive I've ever been to, if not the most positive. And especially with the messaging, people were unsure how it was going to look like. And so there's been a positive surprise on that. Because it is 33 minutes, I could talk with you for hours, and we will continue this conversation off camera, that's for sure. But if we could summarize then in terms of on the next 6 months and coming up to your 1-year anniversary, what are the top 3 things that you want to see happen or you're going to get done? And you tell me, how can I support as well?
Okay. So I'm known to make quick decisions, but calculated and educated ones. So if we were to get back behind the microphone in 6 months, I'd like to say that we successfully started the commencement of the implementation of our new Moonshot strategic plan, which will result in the establishment of ISU satellite campuses, meaning we have a physical presence in 6 regions of the world: North America, Latin America, Caribbean, Europe, Middle East, Asia Pacific, and Africa. And we're well on our way to being able to do that. And I'll be happy to report that we have programs that have been implemented that are providing new skilling, upskilling, and reskilling opportunities to train the current workforce and the future workforce. And what was the last question?
What's your top 3 that you wanted to see?
So the top 3 is the implementation of our plan, the establishment of our campuses, and working in a very positive direction around revenue diversification that allows ISU to be a financially self-sustaining organization that continually reinvests the profits back into the expansion of our programs, the ultimate mission of why we're here.
Yeah. And the last point I just said was, how can I support if I can? So.
Well, you're already doing it by providing this opportunity, and we're going to continue beyond the microphone about how we can collaborate. And I always like to turn around and how can we help you? So that's another question for you to think about.
Excellent. And I will definitely think on that. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our wonderful audience?
I think the fact that you got a captive audience and they're interested in what you're doing is amazing. And I just have to say thank you to the audience for continuing to support space. It's the most challenging thing that humans will ever have to address. And together we're going to achieve the mission. And my most important thing is stay connected, communicate, and to thank you for your continued passion. And let's just keep the motion going.
John, thank you so much. We are going to go and continue the conversation offline.
And if you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.